Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, my name is David Frerer. I'm a detective with the Gilbert Police Department, and I have been with the police department for about over 20 years now. Right now, I'm assigned to the Violent Crimes Unit, which investigates anything with violence, homicides, armed robberies, and that type of thing.
Can you tell us the different areas you have worked while working for the Gilbert Police Department?
Absolutely. I started with patrol. I did that, and then I went to become a school resource officer in high school, which was a great gig. And then I was assigned by the chief as an internal affairs detective. I did that for 2 years, and then I tested and I made it to the Violent Crimes Unit.
How long have you been in the Violent Crimes Unit?
Since about 2019.
Okay. On October 2nd of 2019, were you in the Violent Crimes Unit?
I was.
How long had you been there at that time?
I would say since July of that year.
Were you part of the detectives who were called out to 3875 East Phelps Street in Gilbert?
I was.
When you arrived, can you describe for us what you saw, what the scene looked like?
Sure. Detectives get called out a little bit later, so the scene is usually secure. When I pulled up, I recognized that there was yellow police tape around the scene, or at least a portion of it. There was police officers with their marked vehicles in the area.
When you got to the scene, were you briefed or given any information about what it was you were there for?
Yes, we usually receive a briefing from either the case officer that's there on scene or a detective that is right there before I did.
Okay. And what did you understand you guys were investigating there?
What I was told was a gentleman was coming home to his house. When he was getting ready to pull into his driveway, he was shot at. He quickly left the area and called 911.
What was your role at this scene?
I usually just, this time I filled the gaps where it needed to be. So I took photographs. I collected any evidence that was there at the scene, coordinated with the case detective, Detective Pillar.
Did you work with Detective McDermott?
I did.
And did you ever work with Detective Biggs?
Yes, I did.
While you were there, did you see the Tesla?
I did. By the time I got to the residence, the Tesla was parked in the driveway and the doors were open.
When you, let me ask you this. In your time as a police officer, have you seen bullet holes in vehicles before?
Yes.
And can you tell us, as a either detective or patrol officer, did you ever have any training on, start first with processing crime scenes?
Yes, I attended the crime scene and advanced crime scene.
And what is the crime scene and advanced crime scene?
Crime scene can mean many, many things, from photographs to collecting latent prints, trajectory, blood spatter.
Okay. So when you saw this Tesla in the driveway, did you observe or look at a defect in the car?
Yes.
I'm going to put up starting with Exhibit 26. Where did you notice this defect?
That was the driver's side, right above the door or the window.
And when you observed this, I'm going to put up Exhibit 30. What did you believe this to be?
That is consistent with a bullet hole or a projectile that would go through metal.
Why did you determine that this was from a bullet?
Well, we look at the the totality of the circumstances, what's being told to us, what's being reported. According to the victim here, he said that he was shot at because he saw a weapon. And so that's what we were taking it as a bullet hole. It does have the consistency of a bullet hole. You can see the clean that goes into the metal.
When you say clean that goes into the metal, what do you mean by that?
Well, a bullet is very hot when it comes through, projectile. And when it comes through, it can go through metal pretty easily. Depends on the round or the type of, it's either handgun or rifle. This is a larger hole. With the melting around, you can see around the sides. So I would assume with the victim saying he was shot at, that's where the bullet hole would have been.
When you are looking at a scene, are you also looking to the physical evidence to tell you whether or not this is in fact a bullet hole?
Yes, we look at the bullet hole or the hole, see if there's any evidence, maybe pieces of projectile, any type of, could be a casing on the ground or any of that type of stuff. That's what we're looking for as far as a bullet hole or damage to a vehicle.
So in this case, the shape of this hole and the clean that you described told you that this was from a projectile striking and going into this vehicle?
After we found the projectile, pieces of projectile also.
So in addition to the shape and clean of the hole, you also looked to the physical evidence of the actual projectile fragments?
That is correct.
Were you present when those were found?
Yes, I was.
And we see here in Exhibit 40, was this sort of some molding that was along the frame of that Tesla?
Yes.
Just, I guess, a little to the rear of the bullet hole itself?
Yes.
And in that molding were projectile fragments recovered?
Yes, and that is one right there.
When you looked at these fragments, what told you they were projectile fragments?
Well, the consistency of what a metal, I'm not a metallurgy by any means, but this would be consistent to what a projectile looks like after it has been struck, something of hard metal. There's also, there could be some jacketing left on the projectile also. Could be markings, so we're looking for all of that.
Do you look sometimes to see, for instance, if there's anything like a copper on the fragments?
Yes.
In this case, do you recall if there was copper on the fragments?
Yes, I believe there was.
In your training and experience, having worked as an officer for over 20 years and having seen other projectile fragments, was what you and the other detectives found in that molding consistent with all the other projectile fragments you'd ever found?
Yes, they all are similar in shape and size and color.
And in your training and experience, when a bullet hits something hard like a metal, have you on other occasions seen projectiles fragment like that?
Yes. And that depends a lot on the bullet itself.
So depending on the bullet and what it hits changes if it fragments or not.
That is correct.
In this case, though, knowing this went through metal, were you surprised to see it fragmented?
No.
In this investigation, did you help canvass the scene to try to find any residents who might have cameras that might be around to show anything?
Yes, and that's a normal practice.
In doing that, did you find anyone who had any cameras that showed anything?
There were people with cameras, but they didn't catch. Sometimes the cameras don't go all the way to the roadway. It's just to their walkway for their own purposes.
Okay. Did you help in any way with searching the roadway to try to recover any other pieces of those fragments?
Yes, but searching for fragments on a roadway is very difficult. We even brought out a metal detector to try. But we're talking about a vast area because the victim actually drove away from the scene. So some of the projectile could have been left in the vehicle until he left. He turns a corner, he speeds up, slows down, it could have fallen out. So it was very difficult to find anything else on a roadway that large or a scene that large.
And you're talking about what could be small little pieces.
Very small.
So although you guys attempted to follow the path that Brandon had expressed he'd driven,
Yes, we did
you locate anything?
No.
As a detective in the Violent Crimes Unit, do you often help other detectives with sort of follow-up work?
Yes.
So if they need a little help executing a search warrant or doing something like that, you might get tasked with that?
Absolutely.
So in addition to helping to work this scene and helping to process the Tesla, were you asked later on in December 23rd of 2019 to help execute a search warrant on a Ford F-150 that was owned by Alex Cox?
Yes, I was.
Where was that search warrant executed? Where did you, I guess, process and search through the vehicle?
The Gilbert Police Department has a property building, and it's a very large parking lot for vehicles. And there are 2 fully covered bays that we actually can bring our vehicles into to keep us kind of out of the weather. It's very hot in Arizona, obviously, so it's very hard to search out in the middle of a parking lot. So these bays are air conditioned, and we were able to close the doors, and that's what we did at 2750 East Williamsfield Road, and that's in Gilbert.
So were you tasked on December 23rd of 2019 to help execute a search warrant on a Ford F-150 that was owned by Alex Cox?
Yes, I was.
Were photographs taken during that search warrant?
Yes.
Shown the defendant exhibits 112 through 118. If I can have my paralegal approach. If you can take a look at those and let me know if you recognize those photographs.
Yes, I do.
And are those photographs that were taken during that search warrant on December 23rd?
Yes, what usually happens is we'll have a crime scene technician who will, when we start the warrant, they will take overall photographs before we even search the vehicle, before we even touch the vehicle. So that was where a lot of those photographs came from. Once that is completed, and sometimes they search for DNA, they swab the insides of the vehicle. Then once that is all finished, then I will actually go in to the vehicle to search it.
State will move to admit exhibits 112 through 118.
No objection.
112 through 118 are admitted.
So in 112, do we just see, I guess, photographs are taken of the exterior of the vehicle, like you said?
Yes.
So 113 and then 114, does that show the rear and the license plate of this truck?
Yes.
So it was a personalized plate, CPQUINT?
Yes, and when you first showed me those pictures, I've searched a lot of vehicles. So the first couple pictures show the truck, but once I see the license plate, I remember that license plate specifically because it is personalized.
Okay. So in this Jeep, did you look inside to see if you could find a registration?
It was the F-150 I searched.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I found the registration, and it was all those items that were photographed were found in the middle console in between the driver and passenger seat.
Okay, so in Exhibit 116, we see that this vehicle is registered to Alexander Lamar Cox.
That is correct, and that is that truck. We do match it with the VIN.
Okay. And this was from 4/8 of 2019.
Well, that's when
That was printed at least.
yeah.
Did you find inside a letter from Chad Daybell to Alexander Cox?
Yes, I did.
Did you find inside this vehicle any evidence of gun ownership?
Yes. And in the picture, you can see
And I'm going to put up 117. Is that a closer up of one of the items?
much better.
What is that?
That is a practice bullet. When you're loading your gun, it will help you dry fire. Because when the chamber of a weapon is empty, it usually will not fire unless it has something in there. So that's what we use for this type of thing. It's a 223 round, so that means it's going to be a rifle. And this is just a practice round, so you'll be able to cock the gun however it is, and it will load so you can pull the trigger. And that's usually for help aiming the rifle.
And then did you also find some earplugs in there?
Yes, and that's common for when you go to the range or even at the Gilbert Police Department when we shoot our qualifications. We are issued some earplugs just like that, the orange.
And did you impound all those items?
I did.
The state has no further questions for this witness.
All right, Ross?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and start.
Detective Frerer, when did you arrive on the scene that day? Do you remember?
I do not.
Who was there when you arrived?
I believe Detective Pillar, Detective McDermott. I arrived with Detective Biggs.
Okay. Did you see Officer Robb there when you arrived?
I believe she was there.
And what did you do when you first got there?
This was several years ago, but it would be normal for me to get a quick briefing to see what happens and what needs to be done.
Okay. And who briefed you?
I can't recall, but it's usually either a patrol officer or it could be the a case detective.
Which was Detective Pillar?
Yes,
Okay. And is it Pillar or Pilar?
Pillar.
Okay. And you don't remember if it was Detective Pillar who was the one who briefed you?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay. But you were briefed to what did the briefing consist of?
What basically crime we had, what had occurred at the scene, and if there was any evidence on scene to start with.
And did you observe other people at the scene as well?
Yes, there were several officers, and I do remember the victim was with a few other friends, I believe, but they were outside the crime scene.
And where was the victim and his friends located when you saw them?
They were outside the crime scene.
Can you tell us where that was in the neighborhood?
Well, it was visible from the actual house, so crime scene was across the road, I'd say maybe 50 yards away from us.
Okay. Just sitting or standing or hanging out?
I think they were just staying there until Detective Pillar was going to go question them.
You had mentioned that Brandon told his story and then someone briefed you about it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you took photos? Is that
I
correct?
took, yes, some photos, yes.
How many photos do you think you took?
I don't recall.
A lot?
I don't have an answer for that, I'm sorry.
More than 20?
Yes,
Okay. Less than 100?
probably.
Okay.
I am not sure.
And then you said you collected evidence. What evidence did you collect?
I stood by and I received the projectiles that were removed from the Tesla.
And they went into an evidence bag?
Yes.
And then they were delivered where?
We take them to the Gilbert Police Department. We have a property room there. We can itemize it and seal it and store it in a locked container.
And someone's in charge of that? It's logged in, I guess?
Yes, every piece of property that is taken in has its own unique identifying number. It's unique for the Gilbert Police Department, as Mesa or the other people would have their own unique numbers also.
Okay, so it would basically consist of like the log having its number, the name, the date, or something consistent with that?
Yes, consistent with that, yes.
Okay. And did they remain there until now when they're here? Or,
They would stay in storage until a detective or somebody checks it out.
okay, and that would probably be the case agent would check them out to bring them to court?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the normal procedure.
And then, do you know if any of those projectiles were tested?
Tested?
Yeah. To be consistent with a handgun or a rifle?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And who would do that testing if they were tested? Who would send that out?
We would send that out.
So you could do it?
No, we would send it out to a scientist or a forensic scientist of some sort.
Okay. But I'm saying you could be one to say, hey, we should test this.
Yes, I believe so, yes. If we believe there's evidence in it,
Or the case agent could send it out.
yes,
Anyone could request it, is what you're saying.
true.
And did anyone request that?
I am not aware of that.
And did you specifically request that?
I did not.
Okay. You mentioned something about it being large, the bullet hole. How large was it? I had a picture.
Well, you could see in the pictures, I would say approximately, it's been a while, but I'd say approximately maybe 2 inches by 2.5, something in that frame.
Okay. I saw that there was a measuring tape on there that had about 2 inches on it, but it was much smaller than that.
Okay.
Would you say it was more than the size of a dime?
Well, we'd have to look at the photographs if you have them with the, I
Okay.
can give you a better understanding of the size.
You had mentioned that you had searched for casings on the ground. Is that correct?
We look for casings or projectiles, yes.
Did you find any casings anywhere?
No.
Would that be common?
To not find?
Correct.
It all depends.
Where would a casing go, is my question.
There is no scientific way we know which would come out of a gun. We know either right or left, but as far as it leaving the gun, it could bounce, hit anything. There's just a million other things it could do to end up anywhere.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had brought in a metal detector. Would that detect a casing?
It would pick up a casing sound, yeah.
And what was the area where the metal detector was used to try to find some kind of metal or casing? How large, would you say?
Well, we tried the window itself that had shattered out around the vehicle, where the vehicle first came in. We walked the roadway.
In the street?
In the street, yes.
Maybe all of the blocked off area from the police tape?
Yes, and I believe that some detectives might have went to the park, walked up to the round of the park, where we believe that's what the victim told us he went to call 911.
Okay. And then, did anyone go past those markings, like where perhaps Mr. Boudreau had said that he saw the Jeep following him? Like that another shot may have been executed?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
In looking for casings on the ground or in that area, was that search expanded beyond where the police tape was?
Yes.
So would it go all the way to where Mr. Boudreau would have said that the Jeep passed him? Looking for further casings, I mean.
Yes,
Okay. But none were found.
none.
Unless you just have a couple more, we should probably break and get the jury to the jury bus.
Okay, Your Honor.
Do you have a couple more, or should we break?
I have more than that.
Okay, let's recess for the evening. Members of the jury, remember, we're going to start early tomorrow. Please be here ready to go at 9:30 a.m., 9:30 a.m. I appreciate it. Please remember the admonition.
Okay, Detective Frerer, yesterday we were talking about you collected the evidence, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so what all evidence did you collect yourself?
The projectiles from a bullet.
Is there any other evidence that you collected?
At the scene or?
Yes, at the scene.
Yes, just the projectile.
Okay. And then, was there a cigarette collected at the scene, is that correct?
I don't recall that.
Okay.
I did not impound that.
You never saw it?
I don't recall it.
Okay. And you had collected the items that were in the Ford F-150, is that correct?
Yes.
And you collected the earplugs that were in the truck?
Yes.
And you stated that those were common among people who frequent a shooting range, is that correct?
Yes.
And during the course of your investigation, did you learn that Alex Cox frequently visited shooting ranges?
No.
Okay. You mentioned that you remembered Alex Cox's vehicle license plate because it was personalized, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then in the course of your investigation, did you discover what his license plate stood for?
No.
Okay. Or what it was a reference to?
I do not know.
Okay. Did you learn in the course of your investigation that Alex did stand-up comedy?
No.
Okay. We talked about the hole in the Tesla, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said it was consistent with a bullet hole, is that correct?
Yes.
And so that could be a bullet from a rifle or a handgun?
Yes.
Okay. So either one.
Either one.
And those fragments weren't tested to find out if that was from a bullet or, I mean, the bullet was from a rifle or a handgun?
I did not send it for testing.
Okay. You also said that you were the one that canvassed the neighborhood for videos?
One of many.
Okay. But in your report, you said that at 3854 Phelps, that the individual had heard a loud bang but did not investigate it, said it didn't sound like a gunshot. Is that correct?
Can I object to hearsay?
Sustain.
And you had stated that you did collect the fragments, is that correct?
Objection asked and answered.
But the majority of the bullet was never located, is
Let
that
me
correct?
rule on the
Oh, sorry.
objection. It's sustained. Next question.
And the majority of the bullet was never located, is that correct?
We had a projectile. That's what we found, just pieces of it,
Okay.
fragments.
And you had put in your report that you believed it had fallen out during when the victim drove away?
It's a possibility. There's a lot of possibilities.
So my question is, how would it have fallen out? How could you explain it falling out? Could you explain that to me?
It depends where the bullet hole or the projectile goes into a vehicle. There's several, a vehicle is not sealed. All sealed up so there's not ever breathing or anything like that. So there's holes in it, and there's ways that, let's say like venting and that type of stuff for a vehicle. So when a vehicle is in motion, it moves, right? It rocks, goes over bumps. That's why they have shock absorbers. So anything that's on top, it's just like when you accidentally leave your coffee on top of your vehicle and you drive off. It's a good chance it's going to fall off. And it's the same as a projectile on a vehicle also.
Okay. So how far down were the fragments that you found into the hole that was made in the Tesla?
It was located by another detective, but it was easy enough for us to retrieve.
So like it
I don't,
inside the hole somewhere.
yes,
But just so I understand, the bullet breaks apart, is that correct?
yes.
And so maybe the majority fell out and those pieces were left inside.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how much of the bullet was taken apart or how much damage that bullet or projectile would have had.
Okay. But some of the pieces could be in there and the majority of it could fall out?
That's a theory, yes.
And it wouldn't be wedged in?
We didn't locate anything that was wedged in.
But that could have been due to just driving around the block because, like you said, the car jostles.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
If the car had not been in motion, then the bullet should have been intact. Is that correct?
No, when a bullet hits, it depends on the type of bullet, frangible or non, the make, the model. If it hits a solid object, bullets have different properties. So some will break apart a little easier than others. Some will go right through. It just depends on the make and the model of the bullets.
Okay. So no testing was done on this bullet to find out what kind of bullet it was?
The projectile.
Correct. I mean, no.
I did not send it for testing.
Okay. Is that something that could be found out?
What do you mean?
What kind of bullet it was from the fragments?
I believe there's a test that possibly does it.
Okay. And you didn't think that was necessary?
I was not the case detective on this.
Okay. So since those bullet fragments were not tested in any way, the markings on there that you had testified to yesterday that were copper were part of the jacket, is that correct?
The coloring,
Yes.
the color, yes.
So that's just from a visual, that's not from any kind of testing of the copper, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so just looking at
It's
it.
the color.
Okay, that color, copper color, could have been from the Tesla itself?
I didn't see any copper coloring on the outside of that Tesla. It was white in color.
Okay. And then when you said you canvassed the neighborhood, or the Gilbert Police Department canvassed the neighborhood, there was no camera coverage to your knowledge, is that correct?
People I talked to did not have any. I believe there was camera footage found by other detectives or officers, yes.
Oh, there was,
Possibly, yes.
but you did not discover any?
No.
And you have never seen any?
No.
Okay. And have you been working on this case this whole time, or what was your involvement as far as from October 2nd to when you worked on this case?
The original call out I was part of, and then I was requested to execute the search warrant on the Ford F-150. And that was December 23rd.
And that kind of ended your
Yes,
dealings with this case?
yes,
Okay. So all of the reports that you had written were in between that time frame?
yes.
Okay. No more questions, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
Detective, I'm going to start with sort of where we were just ending and go back to some issues from yesterday. In this Tesla, did you note damage to the molding where the window would have gone up into the frame of the Tesla?
Yes.
Can I have the ammo, please? Thank you. So we're looking here, Exhibit 39. So would it be fair to say that there's not a great seal anymore between where the window went up into the frame and the car itself?
That is correct.
And did you also view the glass itself?
Yes.
That was laying on the driveway?
Yes,
And did you also, Exhibit 46, note that little notch or divot in the glass itself?
yes,
And was that sort of consistent with the location of where the window would have gone up into the frame of the vehicle?
that is correct.
So when you're talking about a seal of a window going up into the frame, does the fact that the molding was broken and that there's a divot in the glass and the glass was completely shattered impact whether or not all those fragments or pieces of that projectile might remain inside the Tesla?
There's a good chance they would fall out of the Tesla.
Because the seal is no longer the same as it once was, right?
Correct.
You were asked yesterday about the length of the bullet hole or the size of this bullet hole. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When you're talking about the A here, were you trying to measure from not just the damage of where the bullet started to impact or cause that concaveness in the frame, but just the actual hole itself?
Yes.
Does that still tell you the size of the bullet?
No.
That's just the damage that it caused as it entered into the frame of this Tesla?
That is correct.
You were asked yesterday about casings and fragments, and can we explain what a casing is, what a projectile is, and what fragments are?
Sure. A casing is what the bullet is contained in. That's where the black powder and the actual bullet itself is attached to. A casing is usually discarded after the bullet is fired out of the gun. And it could be caught, it depends on what kind of weapon there is. Revolvers actually keep the casings in as a circle. Rifles are known could keep the casing inside until you eject it yourself. The semi-automatic weapons which police use and which are more common, they have it's a semi-action. It will eject the casing out. The casing just holds the bullet. once the bullet is fired from the gun, it comes out very, very hot. We're trying to explain is when it hits a certain item, it just depends on the integrity of the bullet itself. How strong is that bullet? Is it going to be strong enough to go through metal? Usually not. And so once it hits an item, it is compromised. The bullet is compromised and it makes fragments. It falls apart. And that's where the fragments come from. And that's what we found in this Tesla, with just fragments of the actual bullet.
Okay, so when we're talking about the fragments that you recovered, those pieces of the projectile after it broke apart and after it had first gone through or into the Tesla frame, this metal, and then broke apart. That's what you're talking about when you talked about the fragments that you recovered?
That is correct.
Now, the defendant asked you about casings and if you found any at the scene. Do you recall that line of questioning?
I do remember that.
If you were advised that the person firing the rifle was laying or lying in wait inside of the back of a Jeep, that only part of the barrel of that rifle came out the rear window, and then the rifle was fired, where would you expect that casing to land?
More than likely, it would still be inside that vehicle, the Jeep.
Okay, so you would not expect it to fly forward out of the Jeep and land out on the ground?
No.
The defendant asked you about if you saw a casing over by the pool. Would you expect, absent, I guess, a hole in the floor of the Jeep, to find the casing over there if it was still in the Jeep?
No.
So,
Never found the casing next to a pool.
but you wouldn't expect to find a casing over
No.
there, right?
No.
There was no evidence of anyone shooting over there,
Right.
and there would be no reason for a casing to be over there.
Correct.
So in this case, given the information you were given, were you surprised that you didn't find a casing?
No. It doesn't mean we don't look for the casing. We automatically look for the casings. But since it was inside of a vehicle, it's just like a drive-by shooting type of thing. We'll say once we pull the car over, the casings will be inside that vehicle, most likely. Then one or two might pop out if they have the gun outside the window, something like that, the casing might. But usually we search, there was no casing found in this, so we determined it was more likely than not, inside that vehicle still.
And the casing was in the windowsill? Sorry.
Yeah, the casing was more likely than not inside that vehicle still.
Inside the Jeep still?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no other questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Are there any questions from the jury? I don't see any. Sir, you can step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.